Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us this month for First Fridays at Fusion Studio. My name is Rich Dione. I'm the co-director of the Fusion Studio for Entertainment and Engineering.
And I'm Mary Pilot, co-director of Fusion Studio with Rich.
Indeed. We're real thrilled to have here with us Rick Boss today from Sky Elements, where he leads the business development side of the company and spearheads the team's product management and sales division. As the director of business development, he's the face of the company to the public and works tirelessly to ensure that the drone light show experience is seamless for clients from start to finish. His coordination, business acumen, and years of experience leading successful startups helps keep the company moving forward on the right path, making him a key component of the team's success. I didn't write that. I'm reading it. That's why it was a little stuttered.
That was amazing, Rich. I was so excited to hear that about myself.
we met, Rick and I met exactly 4 minutes ago for the first time face to face. So there we go. But we're real thrilled to have you here, Rick, to talk about Sky Elements, about drone shows, and what's entailed with that. So with no further ado, we're going to disappear and let Rick take over. If you've got questions, pop them up in the chat or in the Q&A, and we'll moderate them on this side. Rick, do you care if we interrupt you during this, or should we wait to the end?
Please actually interrupt me along the way. I prefer that as questions come. I think that would be fantastic to hear what folks would like to talk about and what they'd like to hear more about what we do. It's a new space. So yeah, happy to take any kind of interruptions along the way.
All right. So we'll turn it to you, Rick.
Yeah, thanks wonderful. Thanks so much. Well, we're excited to be a part of this project with Purdue and the Fusion Studio. What we're going to be doing with the students over the next few months is helping to produce a drone light show. And that's going to consist of from marketing to photography to handling the drones themselves to helping with design and animation for the show. So there's quite a few disciplines that'll be a part of this project, and we're excited to work with the students and with the team at the Fusion Studio to make this all come to life. I'd first just start off a little bit talking about Sky Elements and what it is we do. Hopefully a few of you all have been able to check out some of our YouTube videos and look at our site and what we do. But what we are is we're an entertainment company. We use drones to produce images in the sky. It's a relatively new technology. Drone light show business has only been around for about 7 years, 8 years of some of the first drone shows. Here in the United States, there's only been about 600 or 700 drone shows ever done in the United States. We're proud that we've flown more than half of those drone shows. We're the leading provider in the United States, and we fly throughout the United States and the Caribbean as well. So to date, we've flown close to 500 shows over the past couple of years for our clients. That number continues to grow as the interest in drone light shows grow and as the technology improves. It's improved quite a bit over the past couple of years. So when we, excuse me just a second there, pop up, I need to turn off. Over the past few years, the interest has grown. So we've done shows from announcing new movies. If you check out our social media right now, you'll see that we just helped launch the Mario movie that's now in theaters. So that's a great show that we did out in California, as well as with sports teams. So you can see a lot of MLB teams that have happened. We've also FC Dallas as one of our clients as well, flown multiple shows for them. And we fly them for cities, we fly them for birthday parties, we fly them for weddings. So the interest has continued to grow, and we continue to fly shows all over the United States. I'll talk just briefly about the technology itself. So the technology, for those that are technology folks, feel free to ask questions as I go through these, but we're flying drones. They're custom-made drones. These are quadcopters. There's 7-inch propellers on these drones. They are specifically designed just for drone light shows. So the only payload that we have on there is an LED engine. And that's really the heart of our drones, is producing light in the sky. In order to get the precision that you see in the sky, for those that are familiar, is we use a technology called RTK, real-time kinematics. So what's happening is that our base station that we're controlling the drones from, it's surveying all the satellites that are available. So all four constellations of GNSS satellites, and it is creating a correction for the drones. So as the drones are performing their set paths, they're being sent corrections so they know exactly where they are in 3D space. We're able to get precision. We tune it down just a little bit. So we keep our precision down to about 10 centimeters of where the drone can be. But in real practice, the drones know where they are within 2 or 3 centimeters, but we allow them to move around within 10 centimeters, so they're not too jumpy as they're moving through the process. That drone, so that technology is inside the drone. That is our primary piece of technology. It's not new. It's not particularly innovative, but it's an innovative approach applying it to drones for the entertainment. So we use RTK, the drone LED engine, in order to make the shapes and fun shapes that you see in the sky and the images that you see in the sky with the drones. All of it is done flying on set paths. So all of our drones have a set path that we've downloaded to the drones, and they'll fly their own mission. So there's no autonomy to these drones. There's no sensing of other drones around them. So we have no sensing technology on the drones. They have no idea there's another drone in the air with them at all. They're simply flying their set path in 3D space. So the primary goal of our ground control station when we're flying drones is that we're getting them everyone's mission plan for each one of the drones. We're setting their clocks, and then we're setting them on the way. And the hope is that when it was designed, that all of those were in the right space at the right time to perform the show, and the right colors. So as you watch those designs in the sky when we fly, what you're seeing there is all of those individual paths being flown by the drones that are pre-programmed. That programming is actually the big lift with drone light shows. So our programming staff, which students will have an opportunity to participate in the design of the shows. Our shows are designed in multiple 3D animation softwares, and that's really where it happens, is in 3D animation. Most of our team are former 3D animators for video games, movies, things of that nature, and they spend time putting together that show, drawing out each individual dot in the sky. So you can imagine that takes a bit of time, and particularly since it's such a new technology. Right now, we just don't have pre-built software for designing shows. So we're building some of our own. We have programmers on our team. So we have a team of 10 folks that are in our animation and programming department. And not only are they designing shows, but they're designing the software in order to design the next show. So it's a constant evolution in that process, but it's all designed in 3D space. And typically for a 200 drone show, it'll take about 40 hours or so of animators' time to design that show. With our tools, we've been reducing the time that it takes to design a show and output it. But at the end of the day, it really is an art piece that's being produced. And so the more time an artist, the more time a 3D animator can spend on that, the better the show will look, and the better transitions will look, and the more impactful it'll be for its audience. That's the general flow of what the technology looks like. I know that'll be a lot of the questions, and happy to take questions on those. But I'll transition into another area that the students will be able to participate, and that's social media marketing side of things, understanding what it is to promote a show. So we are an entertainment company. We produce drone light shows. So a big piece of that is helping make sure that everyone knows that the show is happening, making sure that the show we're flying has an impact for everyone. Recently, we just did a show for the Houston Rodeo, and a big piece of that was making sure that we're flying in the right spot, that we are able to get as many eyeballs and phones on the drone show as possible so that the client has the best experience and best engagement with its customers and its fans. And so that's part of the process, is helping them understand how to best take advantage of the drone show, how to best utilize social media and videos, et cetera, to help promote it. The other piece that we'll be engaged with the students is actual video production. So if you get a chance to go out to our website, go out to our YouTube channel, please follow us. You'll be able to see some of that work that's done. And we found in our business, at the beginning, we had clients that would perform their own videography to capture shows. And we quickly learned that was an important component of the drone show delivery, of the entertainment delivery, was actually capturing what happens in the sky and what's happening on the ground. So we've actually brought it in-house. We've got 4 full-time folks on our team, as well as quite a few folks that are contractors we work with to make sure we can capture the shows. If you watch some of the shows, you'll see the drones flying through the drone show itself, ground capture, making sure we understand what's happening with the audience and the impact it has with the audience. And for me personally, I haven't been in that side side of things, but it has been very interesting over the past couple of years to really learn what it takes to produce a good video, what it takes to capture a show effectively, and how to direct all the folks that are involved in that. So our team is an amazing team. We're really excited for the folks that we have on our team and excited to share that process with some of the students as we go through this and help them understand how we deploy that videography, how we direct the show process, and to make sure and capture the best thing for our clients and for our own channels and promotion of our shows. So that's a big picture on all the assets, all the facets that we're going to be touching on through this process with the students. Excited for them to see all aspects of the production of a show and of an entertainment piece. Yeah, we're excited to be flying for Purdue. And just a little personal note I'll add on there too is I grew up in Indiana as a young man in my early teens. So I still have some friends that are graduates of Purdue, and I was actually just up there. My daughter is looking to choose an engineering school, and Purdue is on the list. You all might not like to know, though, that we also visited a few others, Michigan, etc. But it was great being up there on campus with my daughter, taking a look at the fine institution of Purdue. So that's an overview of the program that we're helping put together with the Fusion Studio, and a kind of an overview of what our process looks like and the technology in there. Happy to kind of step into any other topics or details on any of those as folks would like to.
Rick, thank you. That was fantastic. And Mary and I were scrambling to find paper and make some notes. We've got a lot of questions.
That's awesome. I love it.
But as well, folks, if you're in the chat, please feel free to add questions in the chat or in the Q&A panel. But I think Mary and I might capture some of the big questions that you have. Mary, do you have some that you want to start with?
Well, of course, I want to start with the technology, right? You would expect nothing less. And so you talked a lot about how you're having to create software, really innovate software on the fly. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, how that has evolved for you all. What have you used as best practices or standards? Oftentimes in engineering, we try and teach our students about the importance of standards and building from standards, harmonizing to standards. Could you just say a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'll touch on it briefly. I love, probably at a future date, we'll be able to talk a little bit more with our creative team on their process in it. But I'll start just with the creative aspect that happens with creating new software and making sure that it's meeting the goals. So as we've gone through this process, there's been small tools that have been built by others that we've tried to build onto. But there's a process that's happened where we said, what's our end goal? What are we trying to accomplish with this software? What are we trying to accomplish at the end of the day for the drone show? And so as our team works through and building that, we've got an architecture of what the goal is. Using that as a template, they've gone through iterative processes. So I think we're on version 4.5, something like that, of one of our, what we call a pathing tool. And a lot of that is some basic programming that happens with the 3D tools and Python, et cetera, to build that software and hit its end goal. So yeah, it's an interesting process. I'm excited every time I hear from our software team on the latest update and how much faster it's made things and how much safer it's made some things too. So with the software, there's collision avoidance with the software, there's distances. We take into account the audience, we take into account the location, and the software can help us make sure we manage all of those risks effectively.
Awesome. And thank you for giving a plug to Python. Hopefully I won't have to encourage students to pick up Python skills.
Oh, we're going to have a fight. I don't know how I feel about Python, but that's a whole different conversation. Maybe I'm just too old school. One of the questions that I have to follow up with that is I've been on a working group for ESTA's control protocols development team. And we've been working on, or they've been working on, I've been observer, object transport protocol is the new protocol they're trying to put together, which is about locating 3D points in space in both their XYZ position and their XYZ rotation, so that we can communicate that information back and forth. So one of my questions for you is, you've got this line pathing or this pathing software, and you may or may not know the answer to this. How do you communicate the position of the drone at any one moment to other parts of your software or hardware tools that need it? Or is that getting too proprietary, which I totally understand you may not want to dig into?
Yeah, and well, it's going to be a little bit out of my zone of expertise too, with understanding exactly what's happening in there. But part of knowing where it is, so there's one aspect of it in the animation process, and that we use spheres with the information tagged to it, the color, etc., that needs to happen in there, so it's not an elements type thing. And once that's pushed out to the drone, they'll have a relative point in space. So when that path that's gone to the drone, it tells the drone where it needs to be. For most shows, it's about 4 frames a second, meaning every second there's 4 positions and there's 4 light colors that the drone will know it needs to perform. And that is all done relative to wherever we're flying from. So it doesn't have to be built out beforehand to say you're going to be flying exactly like we did on Santa Monica Pier. It's all going to be relative to, once we pick that 3D point, everything else will work relative off of it. But that path file has each of those 3D points embedded in it when it's downloaded into the software. So I'm sure some of the students or some of those that are familiar with it, that's pretty straightforward pathing and mission planning that happens for each one of the drones. So more of a novel use of mission planning software than anything new.
Gotcha. And is that streamed to each drone? Is it updated from ground control, or is it downloaded in the drone? It knows, and then it's just getting that feedback from satellite data, and it's sort of hands-free at that point.
Yeah, so what we found, and there's some work going on right now to figure out how we can do something in real time. The problem is latency. That can't happen fast enough, but that's actually being worked on right now. We've already got LED engine solved for, but positioning is right now the latency is just too great on the drones. But in the future, it's going to be fantastic. We'll be able to real time move those drones around in shapes. We're already right now able to real time affect the colors of the drones if we want to. So the special use. But once we're able to do shapes in real time, I think that's going to be fantastic. And I love an audience to call out the shape. So right now, all of those are predetermined and downloaded into the drone. So the drone has all of that information on the drone itself. It's not too processing intensive of information on the drone. For example, we don't need a companion computer to run that. It's running from the flight controller for that information. But interestingly, our next couple versions of drones that we're looking at, in order to do some of the real-time stuff, we're adding companion computers to the PX4 to be able to do some of that heavier lift on the processing and see if we can make some of that happen in real time. I don't know if that answers your question directly, but I think we got close.
I think it does. Yeah. Thank you.
I'm sorry. You kind of slipped it right in there, but I want to make sure I heard what I think I heard you say. There will be the opportunity in the future for your audience to basically direct the shapes that are emerging in front of them.
And that'll be some of the fun interactive. We're always looking for different ways to move the technology forward. And one of those that is on the drawing board and trying to figure out how to make it happen is the ability to get a swarm up into the sky and then let an audience impact it, let real-time information impact the shapes and what happens with the drone. So some of those can be almost art-like, to where we're using crowdsourcing to drive what's happening with it. So it's a real-time art piece, if you will. And other times I could just see that being fun, interactive for kids, shape of the dinosaur. And we'll let AI figure out what a dinosaur looks like and then tell the drones what it's going to look like in the sky.
Chat GPT for drone shows.
It sounds like it's to be fun, and it's not that far away. A lot of it is just solving for the right type of infrastructure to make it all work.
Sure. So something else I wanted to touch on that you mentioned early on is that your drones and the system you use, they don't have any awareness of each other. So there's not a swarm software. There's no sort of mesh network going on there. As far as I know, they're just all by themselves. Is that right?
That is correct. Yes. So it's very it can fool you quite a bit, right? To see the drones, they look as though they need to be autonomous. They look as though they need to have some collision avoidance, but they have none of it. In fact, we don't put any of it on it just simply to save weight, have a longer show, because of the dynamics that would happen, even in the software when we do collision avoidance. So in software, as we're building the show, we'll say, hey, we're going to move it here. And you can watch the processing power that happens even in 3D software program running video engine, and it's just such resources to be able to figure out, okay, how are these drones going to move around? And so the ability to do that in real time with the drones, right now it doesn't make sense. And so yeah, everything right now is completely pre-programmed mission planning for each individual drone. The primary function of our ground control software is to synchronize clocks for their mission, right? And then to monitor the drones during the process. So there's no interaction with them other than to say, hey, we need to stop the show for safety reasons, land the drones. And the operator can select individual drones to pull them down. But even in that process, that drone has no sensing technology. So the operator needs to be careful to not fly it through other drones.
Sure. Again, so many questions that follow up. And the first is, maybe it's not a question, but a comment. It seems like so much then gets front loaded in that, like you said, that pre-production process. There's so much thinking that has to be done in terms of collision avoidance and that sort of thing. I imagine there must be multiple modeling runs done and sort of simulations. That's the word. I couldn't find the word. I'm so sorry. Multiple simulations of the paths done before you even get them in the drones. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. So on the software, as an artist designs it, as the 3D animator designs things, sometimes his vision exceeds the capabilities of the drone. So the software is there designed to go through that simulation and identify where the issues are on there. Is the drone traveling too fast? Is there a potential collision between the drones? That type of thing Av's done in the process to make sure they can make adjustments and find a way to make their vision come to life that's within the parameters of the drones.
Sure. And I think there's a related question there at some point that it would be fun to unpack. What is the workflow, right? Like you're in this piece of software, you do this, and then it goes to this, and it goes to that. But another question that came to mind, you mentioned synchronizing clocks. And partly this is interesting to me because I'm teaching a show networking class right now where we've talked about synchronizing different systems. Are you then streaming clock information of some kind to each drone from ground control, or is it synchronized at the start and then each drone has a clock that's kind of freewheeling?
Yes, the former there, or the latter rather. So that's where we're not streaming real time to them. We're setting their clock. So when I say setting their clocks, they're running GPS time, and then I'm setting their time to start their mission. So when we're with the software, we say, we want you to start your mission at X time, and all the drones rely on their own GPS time to get there. And since our shows are relatively short, so a typical show is about 10 minutes, there's no real drift that happens. Typically don't have any timing issues. Every once in a while, you will see a drone be off by, you can only see it in video. You don't see it with your eyes, but sometimes when you're watching video behind, you'll say, why is that guy off by, maybe a quarter of a second at the most you've ever seen? Sure. So we have had where we're like, okay, track down that path, track down that drone. Let's find out what's going on. Why is that guy having issues with his clock? And typically what we find is it's not the clock. We find it is at a parameter setting that's inside the drone that has caused some type of issue. So with so many things, it's troubleshooting, right? It's finding what exactly did I miss in a particular argument, a particular programming sequence, or did the latest version make it into every single drone? Or is there some artifact from a former firmware, something like that?
Well, and you're creating the system from whole cloth, right? You guys are, you're starting this new, so. Mary, do you have more questions?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I have 1,000 questions, right? As normal. So one of the things that you mentioned was kind of that seamless look, even the bad boy of your drone performance, where you said, oh, you had to figure out who he was and pluck him out of the experience later. Thinking about pre-flight checklist, right? Sure. What to enhance your reliability and safety? what does pre-flight checklist look like for something like this to try and preempt any of those parameter errors or maybe even just something simple that got overlooked when they were packed or moved to the next
Yeah.
show or whatever?
Great question. An important part of it is the process in order to perform the show. So there's quite a detailed checklist. In fact, it's sitting right over here. There's a latest version change on one of the checklists that I was at a site. Our chief pilot, Preston Ward, primarily runs that, but very familiar with as we go through all of our sites. So when we are working on first putting the drones together in packaging to go out to shop, it's ensuring that all of the drones are on the same firmware, that we're running the same platforms that head out. It's also ensuring that our control base station is on the latest firmware. All of that is checked out. So one is just making sure all your equipment is correct before it goes out. And then on site, what happens is that it's primarily a check of the health of all the drones. So the checklist, once we network all the drones together, so maybe I'll touch on that just a little bit, is that all of the drones are networked together. So when we set out the drones, when we go out on site, they don't know their mission yet. So we've taken essentially a blank drone, we go out to site, we put out all the drones in our pre-designated grid that we'll put the drones out, and then we'll connect them to our network, and our software will evaluate all of the drones to make sure that they're healthy. So there's a process that goes through that, from satellite health, what's the accuracy of that particular drone, so we can see its accuracy in the satellite, we can see how many satellites it's seeing, we can see the battery health on the drone, and we can also see any latency issues that are happening with the drone. So we go through a full checklist on that to ensure that everything is functioning as that should be. Sometimes, as you imagine, right, we've got 400 drones for this last show we just flew the other night, and there's 400 drones out there that are networked together. There's going to be some drones that need to be rebooted, just like you laid out 400 computers. So sometimes, we'll look at it through the checklist and go, there's something there in the latency. Let's just reboot it and see, if the firmware just didn't load as properly as it should. And then sometimes you'll just see that latency that's a problem, or a satellite that's an issue. And so we always bring extra drones to site, and we'll just swap out the drone and tag it. So, we fly over 2,000 drones in our fleet. And over time, what happens is things go bad. And so we'll be on site and understand that there's a satellite issue, which is typically a GPS issue, and they'll tag that and replace it with a drone that works. And once he works through the process, the pilot, and I loosely refer to him as a pilot, they're really a network engineer. Once they've gone through their checklist and really understand each drone's health is at its highest point, that's when they'll download their mission planning. So they'll download the full mission plan to all the drones to perform the show. And then once that's all done, then there's another series of checks that happens too. Once it has the data, to ensure it has the data, that they have the right flight path for their position there on the ground. And then they'll go right back through the same health check as well before they fly the drone. So a very detailed check to make sure that the drones have everything they need. And the primary reason, the very first reason going through all that, is safety. If you have a drone that doesn't know where it is, well, then it's not going to respond appropriately when it flies its mission. We don't need a drone show in Florida going to California. It needs to stay where it is. And there's sometimes you see that where it will not find where it is. And you'll reset it a couple of times, and time to replace that drone, send it back to the shop, figure out what's going on. And we use multiple geofences as part of it too. So the drone needs to know where it is, so that if it does drift from its pre-programmed path, that when it touches that geofence, that it will return to home, or it'll land, whichever we decide is the proper procedure given where we're located. Typically, we bring them into land. So the number one is just safety. If that drone doesn't know where it is, it's not performing its highest, there's a potential that a drone could cause an issue. And then second is to make sure that the show looks great. If every drone's performing as it should, and they're marching in lockstep, it'll make for an awesome show.
Sure. So just to confirm, I don't know if geofence is a term that's more broadly known, and I just don't know it, but that basically means there's boundaries on where the performance space is, right? And if it hits against that, like an invisible fence in the backyard for my dog, right?
Yeah,
it knows
exactly
where that fence is, and it can't go any further.
Or
right?
your Aruba.
Or the Roomba, right.
Or the
Okay.
Roomba, exactly. So we give it a Roomba fence, and it's a geo
right.
fence that the pilot, the network engineer that's there at the controls will set based on the location. They'll literally draw a fence around the area, and then they'll upload that information to each drone. So we upload a path to the drone, what their mission is, and then we'll also upload to them what the fence should be. In other words, if they cross out that off of that pattern, then they'll come back. And that's happened before. So, as we go through our FAA checks and we log and we share with the FAA there, and what we would consider a failure, FAA considers a success, right? When that drone decides, I'm going to Cleveland and we're in Miami, that drone hits the fence and you'll see him coming back. You're like, why is that guy coming back? And he'll land and you'll find out later, well, he hit the fence. Typically the pilot sees it. They'll see him wandering off and hit the fence and come back. And in real time, they can even grab the drone and bring it back if they see it faster than it hits the fence. But we typically keep a pretty tight fence so they don't have to wander much, and they'll head back on that geolocation fence to lock them in.
Gotcha. Just reminding everybody, because this is a good opportunity to do so, please feel free to put questions in the chat or in the Q&A. There was a Q&A earlier we meant to mention. We have opened the chat up, and I apologize that we didn't say that earlier. So it is open if you want to give it a shot. But again, we'll continue to ask questions over here because Mary and I have a long list.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to move off of technology because it seems that storytelling is really at the core of a successful performance from a customer experience standpoint, right? It's about the experience, and they don't need to know all the technology. They just need to know the wow factor happens. And so could you talk a little bit about maybe where that talent comes from in your organization? What's their backgrounds for creating, you mentioned gaming a little bit, but could you just talk a little bit about that?
Sure, absolutely. And you're right. How we can move an audience, how we can impact an audience is a huge part of what we do. And it's a combination of things. It's a combination of really who the client is and leaning into the story that they're looking to tell. And then our team, so when our creative director, Brian Geck, he's got some great creative chops. And then when he looks for 3D animation folks, he really is looking for artists and then animators secondarily. So we've got some great artists on our team. And part of that creative process sometimes is finding the right animation artist for that particular project. So we do go through a process where a particular project, our creative director might say, okay, I want the three of y'all to give me your thoughts on this. And one of those will be selected for that project. And it kind of changes between projects because they'll really understand the story the client is looking to tell. And so there's a process internal to ensure that we have that. But the biggest lean is leaning into the client. And I'll relay one in particular show that we did. It was a relatively small show, 150 drones. But this particular show, the company that sponsored it, the show was talking about the history of their company. And they had a founder who had passed away. And it was a really simple show, just simple images. And at the end, there were a couple of signatures on it. And I recall us going through the process and going, I don't know that I understand the impact this is going to have. I don't know that it has everything we need it to have. But where the client knew this is the story they wanted to tell. And we said, we're here to tell the client's story. And I was up on the roof with the CEO as the show was flying, and there was 600 people there maybe. And the group around me, by the time we got to the end of that show and the original founder of the company's signature writes into the sky, people were crying around me. The impact that it had on them through the story, it moved me just to move. You just feel all the movement as they went through the projects that folks had given their life to for years and years and years professionally. And then the person that was really their leader for 20 years through those processes. It's quite moving when you really find the story that your client, that your audience is looking for. And so, it's fun to find those projects that really are meaningful for folks.
We have a ton of questions
so the
coming
questions
in.
started popping up. So we're going to start with the first
they
one.
found
That's
the chat.
Love it.
That's
a fun, fantastic story because you never know what narrative is going to be that's going to impact a particular
You never
audience,
know.
right?
Yeah.
Trust the stakeholders. Yeah.
If you're not, you're connected to the audience, and that's what's important.
Yeah. So Brandon has asked, how long does it typically take to prepare a new show from the planning, programming, all the way through the setup on site and the performance?
So we tell our clients that we like anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks for a full production timeline to make something happen. But we can make things happen relatively quickly as well. I share that with folks too. But to really do the process right, it takes a solid 6 weeks to go through, understand what the client's looking for, make sure we have the story right, and then going through the programming, because the programming is an iterative process with the client. We're sharing with them, here's what this looks like with your 400 dots, because we're drawing with dots. I'm not drawing with a pencil. So I may not be able to fully realize what they want in the vision. And so there has to be some changes in there. And once all of that programming is done, so 200 drone show might be 40 hours of programming or so, constantly be adjusting 40, 50 hours is kind of where it lands. And once that's all done, then the prep work for actually performing a show, since each drone has no idea its mission, it's relatively agnostic, the process to get drones on site, set things up. That process looks very much the same. So it's very structured and very quick to happen. So after we program, get everything done, when we show up on site, we typically only need to show up about 4 hours before the performance, fly the show, and then it takes us about an hour and a half to break down.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And
Yeah,
Robin, I saw your question, but Craig's question that came up afterwards is connected to what Rick was just saying. So I'm going to go with that one first, if that's okay. Craig wants to know, can you talk more detail about that storyboarding and storytelling development process with the client from start to finish? How many back and forths are there? What kind of meetings are there? How does that process sort of come to life?
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. So that process begins with our creative director sitting down with the client and really understanding what the story is that we're looking for. Sometimes the story is very simple. Hey, we're releasing Mario Brothers and we want to fly on the pier. Pretty straightforward. We find some images on there and it all happens. Others, more meaningful. We just flew a show for Key West for their 200th anniversary, right? And there's more iconography in there that are important, and the storytelling that's behind it is more important. We, maybe even thinking about it more is really the last one we just did for Martin Luther King statue unveiling. Really, really impactful story with spoken word over it, really a moving presentation. And so understanding the story that we're going to tell with the client, and then we'll start storyboarding with the client. First, I kind of call it an inspiration board, but it's a storyboard where we're not drawing with dots. We're simply just sketching out or clip arting, kind of here's what the flow would look like. Here's what we're thinking on that. And then once we start to get settled in on that, then we'll build it out into dots so they understand what it looks like in dots, and that'll be a secondary storyboard. And then we'll start giving them animations to make sure that that's flowing together. In other words, that particular sequence is lightly animated. And once that is all approved, then our animators will get to work and pull that all together into one drone show.
Awesome. Thank you. Can you read Robin's question, or you want me to read it? The screen is really far away from us here. So
go for it.
Okay. Robin has asked, what kinds of abilities or mindsets do you look for when bringing new people into your team? And that would include both engineering or technology and non-engineering, non-technology kinds of abilities.
Yeah. People and everything in life, that's what makes the difference, right? Is having a great team, having a great culture to be on your particular mission. And so for us, our particular mindsets that we're looking for in people are problem solvers, folks that when a situation comes up and it is tough, somebody who is an independent problem solver. That's one of our primary things that we look for in a team member. And the reason for that is that you might have an animation you're working on. You're working inside of a team, folks, but this is new technology. There's new programming happening. So need to be able to figure out how to solve problems and not be stuck on it. The same happens when deploying a site. As I mentioned earlier, the act of showing up on site and putting together is relatively structured, but you sometimes get to a location and there's magically a tree now there. There's magically a dumpster there. Magically, the show is happening in a different location. So being able to have that that flexibility, that problem solving capability in real time is an important component of it. And then second, I would say, I call it want to, is folks that want to be involved in a process, right? That want to be involved in making really cool things happen. And we're really blessed that we're really doing really cool things. So it's easy for us to find folks that want to do cool things and have some fun putting on shows.
That's great. Thank you. Once again, I have more questions, but I want to give Mary, my colleague, a chance.
Can you give me a chance?
If you want to.
Awesome. You provoked another thought around elements of legal. So we talked about safety, we talked about reliability, but as you start designing logos that might be copyrighted or trademarked, and you start bringing in scores of music, how does all that legal aspect of what you do in terms of designing a show work?
Yeah. Intellectual property is very important. And we work with really large brands. So Major League Baseball, Sony, Disney, Hulu, just big brands. Star Wars is a big one too. We've done multiple Star Wars shows. So making sure that we're following how they need their imagery posted. It's not just pictures, right? Because we're doing it in dots. So it is a creative process to reach out to there. So we don't take anybody's IP and fly it in the sky without their permission, I guess is where I should start from, right? So we work directly with anyone who owns that particular intellectual property and making sure that we are following their brand guidelines, that they have input in what it looks like. Lucas Films is a great one. They have a great process because their IP is all over the place. So they're great folks to work with, and we mock things up to them and say, hey, here's what we're looking at, here's what the client is looking for in this show and what we want to bring to life. And then they have their input to say, hey, your Millennium Falcon is off just a little bit, or hey, the first year when Baby Yoda came around, Grogu, right, is they said, hey, you can't have Grogu in there with some of the other imagery that you have there. So you're making sure and following the canon of Star Wars and of these different clients. So I remember one also when we were doing SpongeBob, one in particular, it was like, hey, the tie isn't quite right. Some of the colors there, adjusting on there. So yeah, we work closely with anybody who has the intellectual property rights to those. And we just don't fly shows without their protection. And then the last one on the music side of things, the Star Wars is another great example, is that you have to have rights to be able to play that music. And so for like the Oakland A's, when we flew their first Star Wars show, we had music rights for live, but we did not have music rights for recorded. So when you see the videos that you from us or from anyone who dropped it that was following the brand guidelines, that's different music. So we had to dub in, somebody's cover of Star Wars songs or something that was relatively close. We couldn't actually use those particular songs. So yeah, that's an important part of the process, and one that our creative director works closely with whoever owns those particular rights. And we've had shows before where clients like, I really want this in the show, and we couldn't obtain rights for them. We said, you can't get rights on this, and so let's find a different creative.
Sure.
Thank you.
That's great.
Yeah,
a very important conversation to have, especially from an engineering perspective, but also from every creative aspect of, being respectful to other people's work and making sure that you're representing it in the way that is faithful and true to their original intent.
Absolutely. There's an interesting one happening in our space too, just because it is new art. Just like so many things, when new art comes into play, is who has the rights to that's in the sky? And that's actually an ongoing conversation in our small community, is who owns the rights to that? What happens when somebody says, we've had it happen to us since we fly so many shows, where somebody says, I want to fly exactly that, another competitor, and they just flat copy exactly the imagery and iconography that has been developed. And we've had what are unique custom show designs that we've done, and they're copied. And so, yeah, that's an ongoing conversation. It's like, what does that mean? Is that just flattery, or is there some consequences to that?
That's an even bigger, fascinating question that I hadn't considered. Right? Who owns the IP to the work that you're putting in the sky? Fascinating.
Yeah.
You were talking about making the colors match for a particular brand, for example. I started thinking about the technology behind that LED engine and the color mixing and all of that, which is a whole conversation I'd love to have. But I also was thinking, and a question I wanted to ask about that came up in my head a little earlier when you were talking about showing up on site and there's a tree suddenly, or there's a dumpster suddenly. And it occurred to me that, if you're making this performance for a really large audience in an outdoor space or even in an arena space, they cover a large amount of ground. And so the perspective from this person at this end zone in a football arena is going to be very different than the perspective of this person down there. How do you account for that in the design process? Like, I imagine part of it has to be about what distance you have the performance at from the audience. Maybe I'm making that up, but what goes into thinking about making sure that those images look the same or look correct for everybody, regardless of where they're seated?
Yeah, that's an important consideration anytime that and it starts at the very beginning of the conversations with our clients is who's our target audience, where are they going to be, and is there ability for us to position in a way that will make an impact that is worth the effort from the client. Is oftentimes we start off conversations like, hey, we'd love to fly a show for you, but let's figure out if it even makes sense for your venue and makes sense for your audience. And so that's an important consideration. So, and that starts in 3D Earth. We'll drop a polygon in 3D Earth and take a look at it and see, can the audience see it from the right location? Are there obstacles in the way? Is there a building in the way? Because you might look at it on Google Earth flat and on Google Maps and go, this would be a great location. My audience is right over here. It'll be wonderful. And then you look at it in 3D space and you're like, there's a building in the way, or half of it will be cut off by this building. And do we want to make some changes to make sure the audience can see it? So that's the first step in it, is just making sure that we have good lines of sight. And then the other, as the audience is larger, sometimes we'll pan the show. So we need to pan the show, move it around, make it more 3D for particular imagery. Also, sometimes we'll just flip the show. So there's a great example when we flew Halo last year in Austin. If you want to watch that video, I think it'll show it in there, where we've got the Paramount logo facing this way. It doesn't rotate 360 degrees. It literally dissolves and then goes into reverse really quickly. So cool little things like that to make sure that everybody gets the audience perspective. There's another one we did for the Grammys, and they had a target audience that they wanted to hit for this show. And so we flew it targeting their audience. And then we flew a second show behind it, reversed, for camera capture. So we're not only considering the audience, but we're also considering what is the digital asset that the client's looking for. They wanted Hollywood in the background. And so you reverse the images so you can capture it on video and have the Hollywood in the background for that particular one. So yeah, an important consideration on where we fly from, how the show's designed, and working with the client to make sure it's making the impact that they're looking for.
Fascinating. Thank you.
Yeah,
another question has come up in the Q&A. In some places, drone shows have been replacing fireworks for lots of reasons. And the person who wrote the question mentions wildfire risks, but also noise concerns and PTSD concerns for veterans and that sort of thing. Do you foresee these shows continuing to replace fireworks despite the seemingly much higher cost for these kinds of performances?
Sure. So our background is in pyrotechnics. So we've been doing pyrotechnics for over 10 years in addition to drones. Drones, for us in particular, have been faster growing. So we put most of our intellectual capital into the drone space. So I say that just because I think I've got a good perspective on what's going to happen between drones and pyrotechnics. And if there's a Venn diagram of drones and pyrotechnics, they are definitely going to overlap. But the majority of that Venn diagram for drones is actually going to be outside of fireworks. So we're going to see de novo shows that happen. Like we just flew that Mario show. There's no fireworks that we're replacing to advertise the Mario show. We flew for Avatar at the Niagara Falls. There's no replacement for fireworks to put Avatar in the sky. So there's quite a bit that's de novo. But on the fireworks side, there is communities more and more that it is making sense for them to replace them. And drones have finally become an alternative that are meaningful to their audiences. That you're somewhere where there's that fire danger and you can't have fireworks, but at the very least, you can gather an audience in a traditional way at night and see something in the sky. And the nice thing with the drones is that we can tell a story. We can really get that iconography up there that the fireworks can't. At the same time, we can't do some things that the fireworks can. I mean, the sonic impact of fireworks is tremendous, and it's one that I love, and a lot of people do too. So we can't replace that aspect of it, but we can continue tradition. And I think we're going to continue to see more replacement on the 4th of July, on other events that have fireworks a part of it, for environmental factors, for community standards, for, as you mentioned, PTSD. That's a one that we've replaced a couple of shows, I know in particular, for that particular reason, to be respectful to their community. And the cost side of things is that drone shows are more expensive than fireworks on average, but it depends on your community. Actually, in California, drone shows are not too far off from fireworks shows as far as cost, because in those communities, it's just an expensive proposition to have fireworks there, as well as some Northeast cities, pretty expensive to have fireworks in those areas. Also, someone that has fireworks off of a lake or off of the ocean, the added cost of barges, et cetera, make a fireworks show relatively expensive compared to or similar in price to a drone show. And but then the last thing I put on that is that the drone technology, the drone cost, all of it is going to be pushing forward. So we'll see drone costs for a show coming more in line with fireworks. It'll never get there, but it's going to get closer to where some communities will have a decision to make, and it won't be a financial one. And then lastly, I would say the combination of drone show and fireworks, phenomenal. That is a great experience if that's something that makes sense for their community.
Sure. So we've got about 7 or 8 minutes left. Mary, do you have any final questions that you want to ask?
I guess this one is more for who might be our student audience. So we have a mix of industry and academics and students and practitioners, professionals. But for the student body that's listening, what advice would you give them if this is an area that they're particularly interested in? Maybe they didn't even know it existed as a career pathway. What advice would you give them to present their best self, to best prepare for reaching out to companies like yours and others?
Yeah, good. So one, I would say our industry is a fun one, but it is a tiny one. So as my daughter, who is going into engineering, and she is going to be mechanical aerospace, that's the two spaces she's looking at. I tell her we're too small for the engineering piece of it, right? But the drone space is a huge space, as everyone knows. And so that's definitely a space that all of that blends into what we're looking for. And that space, as you all know as well as I do, is just an amazing space. So fun for the aero and mechanical students to be able to engage in and be a part of. And so my recommendation, and the one that I give even to my daughter too, is just be open to what's happening with new technology. Understand it as much as you can. Keep diving into it. And you can find some really neat opportunities in some of these niche spaces, despite the fact that it's small and you're not going to go to Lockheed to maybe do it, but you could come in and do something really different, innovative, and really push the envelope on what's happening in the space. Some of the folks that are doing the engineering for our drone shows, and particularly for the drones themselves and really the command platforms, there's going to be some folks that are really creating brand new systems and setting the standards in an industry that's going to be $1 billion industry worldwide just for drone light shows. So yeah, there's some neat opportunities. I'd say, my advice there would be open to the possibilities. And if you find something in there and you really want to do something neat and innovative, really take a look into our space. I think you can find something.
That's awesome. And it actually ties to the last question that came up in the chat. I'm going to paraphrase Robin's question and pivot it a little bit, but she's asking about what have you run into that you haven't been able to do? And I guess I would say, where do you see in drone performances as sort of the next big opportunity? Is it programming? Is it flight dynamics? Is it LED technologies? Is it the animation workflow? Where is it that you see is the sort of the next barrier that needs to come down to do even better things than you've been doing so far?
My answer is yes. It's a multifaceted problem that needs solutions in all of those areas to advance it. And yes, we do get asked if for show designs or opportunities that are outside of the bounds of the technology right now. And we're continuing to push those. So one of the areas is length of show. Our typical show is 10 minutes. So we've often get asked, can we do longer? We'd like to perform longer for this audience or for this purpose. And we're continue to push that. For example, we just did a show that was an hour-long show. And what was done is it was a handoff between drones, trying to make it a seamless handoff between the drones to have a hour-long performance. So you'll get a kick out of it too. So if y'all want to go look up our hour-long show, look that on our channels. It was a fun show. And so we're continue to push that. So where's the next pushes? I think it's going to be flight time. What does that look like? How do we perform the show? But probably more importantly, that is, how do we tell the story? How can we advance the flight dynamics of the drones in order to tell a better story? How can we move that drone? Right now, we move our drones typically between about 4 meters to 6 meters a second, right? How can we start moving those to 10, 12 meters a second safely and tell the story? So some of those dynamics are important facets of being able to tell a story more effectively. And really, it's a changing audience, right? As we know so much, as the audience wants to see something faster, quicker, have a faster impact. So we're constantly pushing the drone technology to be able to match the attention span, if you will, of the audiences these days.
Sure. Thanks for that. There sounds like some really exciting research spaces that folks could start exploring.
Yeah.
Maybe here at Purdue, maybe somewhere else. We'll see.
That's right.
Rick, thank you so much. I think we're just about at time. Folks, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. And again, Rick, this was fantastic. I think we all learned a whole lot today. And I, for one, am looking forward to what happens at Purdue here in August when you all come to work with our students during orientation week. So thank you very much. Folks, this is our last first Friday of the academic year. We'll be back again in October with another one. You'll see some more information about that in the coming months. If you haven't signed up for our symposium this summer, Symposium on Education and Entertainment and Engineering, please do so. We'd love to have you here. Is there anything that you want to add?
No, I just thank everyone for coming. This has been a really large group that was interested in this topic. And I think the more you attend these events, you realize there's always intersectional work at First Friday for Fusion Studios. So
Absolutely.
We encourage you to keep coming back.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.